The grand halls of the Waldorf Crest Tower gleamed with gold and marble, reflecting the lives of those who walked its polished floors. It was a place where wealth whispered in hushed tones, where power echoed through mahogany boardrooms, and where privilege reigned supreme. But beyond the chandeliers and velvet-draped lounges, in the shadows of excess, another world existed. A world of those who toiled unseen, whose footsteps faded beneath the weight of luxury. One such soul was Maria Alvarez, a quiet but determined woman whose hands scrubbed the very floors where fortunes were made. Her presence was as unnoticed as the dust she wiped away, until the night Alexander Harrington III, heir to a billion-dollar empire, found himself face-to-face with a reality money could not erase. What began as an accidental encounter would unravel everything he had ever known, forcing him to choose between a world he was born into and a love he never saw coming. Alexander Harrington III had spent his life cocooned in opulence. The heir to one of the country's most powerful financial firms, he moved through life with an air of untouchable certainty. He was used to the best, cars that roared like lions, suits tailored to perfection, and evenings spent with people whose laughter masked hidden agendas. Everything in his life was planned, predictable, and polished, until the night he stayed late at his penthouse office. Maria Alvarez worked the night shift, her hours filled with silence and the rhythmic sound of her mop against the floors of the towering skyscraper. She never expected to encounter anyone important, let alone the very man whose last name was embossed in gold at the building's entrance. But on this particular evening, as Alexander paced his office in frustration over a failed business deal, he stormed out, only to slip on the freshly mopped floor outside his door. A sharp gasp escaped Maria's lips as she rushed forward. "I am so sorry, sir," she exclaimed, her voice trembling as she offered her hand. Alexander, stunned and momentarily humbled, accepted her help. His usual arrogance faltered as he looked into her warm, concerned eyes. There was no calculation in them, no pretense, just genuine kindness. It was a stark contrast to the world he knew, where every word was carefully measured, every action designed for personal gain. For a moment, they simply stared at one another, and in that fleeting instant, something shifted. Their worlds had collided, but neither of them knew just how much that moment would change everything. Alexander found himself drawn to Maria in a way he could not understand. She was unlike any woman he had ever met, uncomplicated, honest, and untouched by the insatiable hunger for wealth that surrounded him daily. He began making excuses to stay late at the office, hoping to catch glimpses of her as she worked. Their conversations started as polite exchanges, but soon, they deepened into something more. Maria, however, was cautious. She had spent her life knowing that people like Alexander existed in a different universe. She had seen the way the rich viewed those who served them, as invisible, insignificant. And yet, here he was, speaking to her as if she mattered. She knew it was dangerous to entertain the idea of anything more than friendship. Their lives were too different. The world would not allow it. Word of Alexander's unusual interest in a janitor spread like wildfire through the corporate circles. His family, led by his formidable father, Charles Harrington II, was outraged. "You are jeopardizing our family name for a woman who scrubs floors?" his father roared during a tense dinner. Alexander's jaw tightened. "She is not just a janitor. She is a person, and she is more genuine than half the people in this room." His words were met with cold silence. His mother, always one to maintain decorum, leaned forward. "You have a responsibility, Alexander. Do not let a passing infatuation ruin your future." But it was not a passing infatuation, and it was not something he could simply walk away from. Maria, too, faced pressures of her own. Her co-workers warned her. Her family pleaded with her to be realistic. "People like him do not marry people like us," her sister whispered. "You are just a curiosity to him." Maria wanted to believe otherwise, but doubt gnawed at her. Could love truly bridge the chasm between their worlds? Or was she only setting herself up for heartbreak? The breaking point came when Charles Harrington II took matters into his own hands. He summoned Maria to his office, his steely gaze pinning her in place. How much will it take for you to walk away? He asked, sliding a blank check across the desk. Maria felt her heart shatter. She had expected resistance, but to be reduced to a transaction? It was a cruel reminder of how the wealthy saw people like her as commodities, as problems to be erased with money. With quiet dignity, she pushed the check back. I do not want your money, sir. I want nothing from you. But as she left his office, doubt clawed at her. Would walking away be the better choice? Could she ever truly belong in Alexander's world? When she told Alexander about his father's offer, he was furious. You are not leaving because of them, he said firmly. You are leaving because you do not believe in us. Maria's eyes filled with tears. I do believe in us. But love is not always enough. Alexander refused to accept that. The next morning, he made a decision that shook the very foundations of his world. He walked into his father's office and placed his resignation letter on the desk. What is this? Charles demanded. My freedom, Alexander replied. I am done being controlled by wealth. I want a life where love is not dictated by a last name. The fallout was brutal. He was cut off, disowned, exiled from the world he once ruled. But as he stepped out of the gilded cage of privilege, he found something far more valuable waiting for him, Maria. She stood at the entrance of the Waldorf Crest Tower, the very place where their story had begun. And as he reached for her hand, she knew that, against all odds, love had won. Alexander and Maria started anew, away from the towering skyscrapers and suffocating expectations. He built a business of his own, learning the value of honest labor. She pursued her dream of becoming a teacher. Their love was not easy, nor was their journey free of struggle. But in the end, they found what money could never buy, true happiness. Because in a world obsessed with status and fortune, they had chosen love. And that made them richer than anyone else.